Jnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. And we could start with any reflections from the day or the week, or any questions that have come up in the course of our hearing and chanting. Yes, Nanda.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So my question from this afternoon's, or this morning's talk was, did Krishna eat the dirt or did he not eat the dirt?
Well, he answers that in the Bhagavad Gita, because in the universal form, he says he devours the whole universe, so that would include dirt. Thank you. Yes. Hare Krishna.
I just wanted to reflect on what you said earlier about when chanting. It's like you're tying Krishna's feet. Krishna is in your heart. You're tying your feet. That really helps chanting well.
Yeah.
I got quite emotional with that as well.
Can you say more about how it helped you? What was it that struck you about that seemed helpful?
So you just firstly said that Krishna is in everybody's heart.
Yeah.
We'll try and remember that, but we keep forgetting. But firstly, trying to think that is our heart pure enough for Krishna to stay in there? But yes, he will stay either way, but we don't want him to go because there's no space for him because there's too many other things.
That's a really nice point.
Cover the heart, but then at least you know
Yeah.
you can try and rope him up and keep him there. So thank you for that.
Sure, let's talk about it just a little bit more for a minute. We think a lot about developing faith in Krishna, and in a general way, we have a sense that Krishna is our protector or maintainer, but it almost seems like it's through agency, and maybe Krishna's busy with his own life. And when we come to know that Krishna cares about us personally, there can be an emotional shift. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Vita raga bhaya krodha manmaya mamupashrita bahavo jnana tapasa putamad bhavamagata. That there's three psychological anomalies that he asks us to overcome in order to be able to be ourselves in our relationship with him. Vita means to give something up, and raga means intense attachment to the material nature. Bhaya means fear of our relationship with Krishna. There's a lot of trepidation that people have in this world about God, even as a concept. They become so disappointed that they feel that there is no God. There can't be. If there's so much misery in the world, how could there be a God? And if there is, he probably hates me, etc., etc. And then krodha means anger, that people feel angry that there are so many different competing ideas about who God is. So they just say, well, nothing means anything. And you get existentialists and playwrights like Samuel Beckett, who write plays that conclude that there's no meaning to anything. And in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, and this is what I wanted to get to, there's a section where Krishna meets Gopakumar, or Gopakumar meets Krishna, or they meet each other. Gopakumar had been on a circuitous route on his way back to Godhead, to say the least. He went everywhere. And made his way back to Goloka. And incidentally, or primarily, the stories about how he did that, which was by staying faithful to his mantra. And the mantra took him to all the different realms and gradually brought him back home, back to Godhead. And when he gets to Goloka Vrindavan, he can't discern a difference between Gokula Vrindavan and Goloka Vrindavan, minus all the traffic. And when he finds his way to Nanda Maharaj's house, he discovers that the people there are stunned because Krishna's still away in the forest with his friends. He's coming home. And since he's coming home, there's a kind of darkness because of the dust raised by the hoofprints of the cows that he's herding. And people become very joyful because that means Krishna's coming back. Their life is coming back to them. So Gopakumar then, at a clearing in the forest where Krishna's about to appear, walks forward, and Krishna comes out of the forest leading all of his friends and notices that Gopakumar is there. And Krishna rushes forward and embraces Gopakumar, and Krishna faints. And Gopakumar sees then that Krishna, in his fainted condition, has tears flowing from his eyes. And when he comes back to consciousness, he embraces Gopakumar and indicates that he's been waiting for him for many, many lifetimes. And in a statement, Gopakumar says, I always tried to cultivate my love for Krishna, but I had no idea how much he loved me. And I've noticed that whenever we read that section, devotees become very emotional. Because even in this lifetime, there's a conundrum of whether anybody loves me. Did my parents love me enough? And it's a psychological barrier for many people throughout their whole lives to not be loved enough. And when we discover that nobody loves us more than Krishna, and he's there for us, even when we're in the material world, the darkest places, and he stays there in our heart. As he says in the Gita, Bhoktaram yagatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suridam sarvabhutanam gyapamam shantim richiti. Remember that I'm your best friend, and I'm there within your heart. So I resonate with your reflection, how when we come to this awareness that Krishna is in our heart, and why is he there? For me, I mean, why bother with me? Because he loves us. And that's a powerful revelation, to know that. Thank you very much. Someone over here, yes. Right, you had questions, and I told you later, and you still got them, right? Excellent.
Yeah, I've wrote lots of points from before, but I really like the point when you said the soul is loitering in the material world, but it becomes fortunate when it comes in contact with the devotee.
Yeah, that's another one of those sections in our Shastras that is so hopeful. The verse I quoted yesterday was Brahmanda Brahmate Kon Bhagyavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasadi Pai Bhakti Lata Peach. That Krishna is helping us to come in contact with the Guru, and the Guru helps us to come in contact with Krishna. Can I give you an example of that? When Dhruva Maharaj left home, he was just a little boy, and his intention for finding God, as his mother had told him, that only God can help you. He was going to the forest because he said, well, where do I find him? I want something from him. I need something from him. And so when he heard the great sages, yogis find him in the forest, he left for the forest. How old are you? He was a little younger, and he headed for the forest, all by himself. And as he was going to the forest, Narada Muni intercepted him. Now the question comes up, because it's mentioned in that section, that Narada overheard his conversation in the palace. And Prabhupada brings up the point that, how did he overhear? Because he wasn't there. And then he says that because Krishna is within everyone's heart, we know the verses, Tesham satati yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te. Krishna says, if you sincerely try to reach me, then I'm there for you. I'll illuminate your path. I'll give you the knowledge by which you can come to me. And so, because Krishna is in everyone's heart, when somebody is sincerely trying to find Krishna, like Dhruva was, then he informs a guru, a guide that Krishna wants to work through to help that person. And in the case of Dhruva Maharaj, it was Narada Muni, who then met him and gave him instructions about how to perform the yoga system in order to achieve him. So I like that section too. Thank you. Go ahead, you have more. Right?
You also said if you don't have anything good to say, don't say it. But then, like, when you're very, very angry and you can't resist it, but then what happens if you say it?
Well, yeah, it takes a lot of practice to not speak things when you're angry. And what happens when you say something when you're angry? Generally, not very good things happen, because there's a kind of intoxication that overcomes our minds and our senses when we become emotional. And anger is the most destructive of emotions. It's mentioned in the Bhāgavatam that it's Rudra, and it burns everything. Anger is one of those energies that's generated from the mode of passion. And so generally, when we're very angry and we say something, then we could say something inordinate that it could disturb a relationship, which could be regrettable. If anybody's ever had the experience of getting an email or a message that they felt indignant about, like how dare they say something like that to me, if you've answered and then looked at what you said the next day, you might regret it. That's why in the old days when we used to have letters and stamps, it was a commonplace experience that you'd write something, an angry reply, put it in the envelope, and then because you didn't have time to go to the post office or the post person didn't come by yet, you didn't send it. And the next day you look at it and go like, no, I don't think so. I know it's a long answer, but what happens is generally something that's not good. Now there is a case, we're not against anger. Every emotion can be used in Krishna's service. Do you know where Prabhupada says something about a great devotee who used anger in Krishna's service? Can you think of one example?
Dhruva Maharaj? Because when Narada Muni was asking him questions, Dhruva Maharaj got serious.
That's pretty close. Dhruva did get angry once, but it was against the Yakshas. And then Manu had to come and say, not so much. You're a little too over the top. I was thinking of Arjuna. As Prabhupada specifically mentions this, in order to fight a war, you have to be a little angry. And because Krishna asked him to fight and win and kill the other side as a warrior, he had to get that Rudra energy going so he could wreak havoc on the enemy. And in that case, because Krishna ordered him to get angry and get out there and fight, he was using it in Krishna's service. In that context, it's not destructive. But if we become angry on our own behalf and then we say something to someone or do something, road rage is a famous, infamous occurrence. Even here in India, I'm noticing, we rate our cab drivers by how many times they become incensed by somebody else's driving. I can't see how you wouldn't do it at every corner here. People just cut in front like nothing else is happening. So you can lose your temper or you can use your temper, but it's very rare cases where we use our anger in Krishna service. Mostly people become angry and then they say, yeah, well, anyway, I meant to do that. It was in Krishna's service, not so much. Anything else? Good questions. Nicely done. Okay, let's see what else. We're just doing reflections, questions, anything that's stored up. 1, 2.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I was reflecting on what you said this morning about all practices fade without attention. And I was just thinking, if you have a passion for something and you love something, then that one pointed attention is there. And I was just thinking that it's, for me, it's so important to have the association of devotees and reading Srila Prabhupada's books every day, because that keeps your faith strong and keeps that love for Srila Prabhupada and Krishna strong. So I was just thinking how important it is to be around devotees and offering and do service, and just keeps everything strong.
Yes, it's an important point. Thanks for bringing it up. And to repeat it, it's all practices fade over time if we don't attend to them. You can see in the professional context, people generally have to get recertification every year or 2 years, especially in medical professions or when you're handling other people's lives, which is food service even. And in devotional service, it's strategic to always have a fresh challenge to try to rise up and meet. Prabhupada said this to Karandar Prabhu when he was giving him instructions about how to manage. He said in a community, you have to give the members of the community a fresh challenge regularly so they want to rise up and meet it together. And we can do that individually as well. We need something to challenge us. In fact, as people age, if they don't have that, they plateau, both physically and mentally, what to speak of spiritually. There's sarcopenia, which means if you don't keep physically active, you very noticeably start to wind down and you lose muscle mass, and then next thing you know, you're easily breakable. And mentally also, if we don't stay engaged, this is just a scientific fact, that the brain starts to atrophy. And spiritually as well, there are accounts of those who have lived in monasteries. They too have midlife crises, because at a certain point they can forget why they're doing it. They may lose the original verve they had when they first got involved and wanted to find God. So in running a race, we plan it out ahead of time so that we can have a good finish. And it's a good idea to think of our life as, well, of course, you don't have to use the metaphor of a race. It might get a little bit tiring. But we are best served by having a strategy, thinking of how can I put at least one whole lifetime together in Krishna consciousness. And to do that, it's helpful to have intervals at which we're trying to reach a new level. Don't stay in a plateau, but try to go to the next level. Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, use every Ekadashi as a test to see, am I more spiritually fit this Ekadashi than I was on the last one? He gave 2-week openings. And so we can do that also and find out how to find what's the next benchmark that we can hit to go to the next level. Your turn. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. My question is about anger and emotions. I had experience that you understand, anger is destroys everything, so anger is bad. And you have such point like you mustn't feel, so you become like frozen. And sometimes something happens and you feel like, you feel uncomfortable, but you can't let your emotions to go, and you can't say that because you feel like I have to be humble. So what means for a devotee on one side to be humble and not to destroy his life, and on the other side be alive.
Well, just taking in the context of a situation where we might be angry because there was a trespass against us. And you mentioned how if we stuff it, as the colloquial saying goes, you know what that means? You have an emotion and you just stuff it. It's kind of a pop psychological term. You just hold it within, you don't let it out. Then what you're saying is it may feel unnatural. And what I've found is that, well, first of all, the definition of humility isn't to become a doormat for other people. Doormat, I better use like that's cliches. You know what a bully is?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So if somebody's bullying you, for instance, humility doesn't mean just to say, okay, fine. I mean, if you're maybe a Paramahamsa like Jad Bard or something like that, but that's not what we're talking about. We're living our lives, and if somebody bullies us or gaslights us, that's another kind of bullying. It's psychological. Humility doesn't mean that I just accept it and ignore it or just don't let anything out. Humility has to do with being a servant of Krishna and realizing that, or doing whatever we're doing with the realization that not only are we doing it for Krishna, but the ability to do anything is given to us by Krishna. Prabhupada asked the question, was Arjuna humble when he went on the battlefield and killed thousands and thousands of people? And the answer is yes. Even though he was violent, he wasn't doing it for himself. He had faced the abyss, and then he got Krishna's instruction to fight, and out of humility, not my will, but thy will, I'll follow it. So I wanted to build that premise, that humility means to do the Lord's work and to work on His behalf, not on our own behalf. So devotees do become angry when another devotee is insulted. When they're insulted, generally devotees, they tolerate it. They don't try to defend themselves. However, when there is something like bullying, or let's say you loan somebody some money and then they steal it from you. In such cases, in our daily life, my mantra is deal with it methodically, but dispassionately. In the case of dealing with something, there's some due diligence you might have to do in order to state your case. But while you're doing it, do it without malice. There is a concept called nonviolent communication. And it means that you communicate to others in the inevitable times when you're offended by them, but you do it in such a way that you don't ascribe intention on their part. Like, let's just say you're in your house and whoever you're rooming with comes in, slams the door, and wakes you up or something like that. And you could swing out of bed and say, you know, you're always trying to wake me up, and I really hate when you do that, and you're a horrible person. In the nonviolent scheme, you say, I know you didn't mean to do that, but I just want to let you know how it made me feel. And that was when the door slammed, it jarred me, it woke me up. And my request is that when you come in the room, you don't slam the door. And this psychologist who wrote this piece on nonviolent communication points out that what irks people the most is when you ascribe intention to them and say you meant to do it. So when I say dispassionate, it means taking that one active ingredient out that causes the problem. And then doing your due diligence, do it methodically but dispassionately. And what can help that is a little philosophical perspective. And that is that in the Bhāgavatam it said that the universe is working in a uniform way, which means that everything, I'm about to use another cliche, I'm going to resist it though. Everything works perfectly because it's all under the guidance of Kṛṣṇa and his energies. So if something happens to you because of somebody else, we can see it as the universe working in a uniform way. And I'll give you an example. Peter Burwash was a friend of mine. He was a businessman, passed away a few years ago. He used to be a professional athlete, and then he started a company called Peter Burwash International. He knew Prabhupada well because he lived in Hawaii. Prabhupada used to live there and write. And Peter Burwash was his headquarters. He took a lot of advice from Prabhupada. And when he was just getting his business started and he got interested in Krishna consciousness, he gave a donation to the temple and he handed it to the local temple commander to start his life membership. And that about an hour later, that person who accepted the money absconded, which means they ran away with the money. And he became so angry. Peter Burwash was very angry, and he went to Prabhupada to complain directly to him, because he lived just right upstairs, Prabhupada did. And when Prabhupada heard his case, he said, the first thing he said was, don't become angry with the instrument of your karma. And Peter Burwash lectured all over the world. And that was what he always started with when he gave talks, is that he learned this from his spiritual teacher. He would say that don't become angry with the instrument of your karma. So there's philosophical ways of dealing with it. They're very practical tools that you can use to get through all these sticky situations, to make sure that you don't make it worse than it was before. But you don't have to just accept it and move on, or just hold it in. There are ways to deal with it. Okay? Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
We spoke about anger, we spoke about how to deal with bullying, and I just wanted to know about how to deal with chastisement. Some chastisement may be for our own benefit. It's good chastisement, or do I distinguish that sometimes chastisement can be extreme and it could even put us off devotional service? How to deal with and how to distinguish?
Well, first let's look from the perspective of us giving chastisement to others. In the 17th chapter of the Gita, in the section in which Krishna talks about the austerities of speech, he says one should speak truthfully, beneficially, one should avoid speech that offends, and one should also regularly recite the Vedas. If there's one more, I forgot it. But those are, what is it? Pleasingly. It should be pleasing, so there's 5. And in his purport, Prabhupada says that one should be sparing with giving free advice to those who didn't sign up for it. This means if somebody approaches you and says, I want to take shelter of you, and I want you to guide my life, and even tell me when I'm doing something wrong, even then you got to be careful, because everyone has certain level of sensitivity, and you have to be a little careful. Prabhupada didn't equally mete out chastisement to everybody. There were certain people who he was more severe with because he knew they could handle it and that they needed it too, because they were so headstrong. And there were others that he barely chastised at all, and some have then later said, Prabhupada knew me and he knew I couldn't handle it. So he wasn't too heavy on me. So when we give advice or chastisement, you should be aware that if somebody didn't ask you for it, it's probably not a great idea just to give it out for free to anybody and everyone. In certain contexts, the best way to do it is to find out ahead of time how they can handle chastisement. And also, I've noticed in a community setting, if you see somebody doing something that's could be better, it's better to make a note of it and turn it into a mini seminar for everybody. What's the difference between that and, let's say somebody's playing kartals a little off, and one of the old pastimes in the old days of ISKCON was somebody would walk up to them in the middle of the kirtan, just grab the kartals out of their hand unceremoniously. And needless to say, that person would be traumatized for the rest of their life. They might even say, I don't know how to play kartals, I'll never play again. Or they might hold a grudge against the person who snapped them. They might be really embarrassed. But instead, in that instance, what if you held a little class on how to play kartals and then required a little certification or something like that? That would be a better way to do it. And in a volunteer organization where there's lots of different kinds of people come from different cultures, we may get friendly fire from people who haven't thought about these things very much and may just wantonly chastise everybody. And so if we're aware of the fact that some people are like that and they chastise us, we don't have to necessarily take it personally. Or we can also take the view of, I live to be corrected. And if somebody chastises me, thank you. And I heard that mantra, I live to be corrected, on a radio interview I heard on NPR when this guy was being interviewed. And the interviewer doubled back and said, wait a minute, I don't think you could say that, what the person said. He was a person from Oklahoma, the one that was being interviewed. And a slang for people from Oklahoma is Okie. And Okie can be considered pejorative. And so he called himself, he was an Oklahoman, but he called, yeah, I'm an Okie. And then the other person who was very PC said, yeah, I don't think you should say Okie, it's pejorative. And he was about, I could tell the person being interviewed, he said, but I'm from, and then he said, okay, I live to be corrected. And he just moved on. I pulled over the car, I pulled out my notebook, said, I live to be corrected. New mantra, carry it with you wherever you go. And of course, there are extreme cases, like talking about somebody who's doing something that is really destructive, in which case there should be in a community a place where you can escalate it safely and bring it up to somebody else and say, you know, this happened and how can we deal with it? At our place, at our temple, our community in ISV, a long time ago, there was some dispute that happened, and it happened like right in the temple room, and it was noticeable because we don't have a lot of disputes like the one that I'm thinking of now. And I talked to Braja Bihari about it, because he's a professional, was a professional, he's retired now. He used to, what do they call those people? Conflict resolution. He's a pro. So I called him up and say, okay, there's two people had a conflict, what should we do about it? And he said, you should all get together and come up with a policy of how to deal with these types of things. So he actually flew out and did a 2-day seminar, and we came up with a written policy about how we'd all deal with a conflict if it should ever come up again. And just raising the awareness, and then also having a clear idea about what to do about things like that. It's important because it's inevitable in any community. Wherever there's people, there's going to be conflict, guaranteed. And that brings up one other point, and that is that Prabhupada overlooked a lot of the conflicts due to social interaction, as evidenced in a letter that he wrote to Atreya Rishi Prabhu, who was a businessman and also he became a GBC. And he was a nice devotee, still on the planet. And he had complained about the bickering that was going on the executive level. And Prabhupada wrote a letter back saying, don't expect utopia. Even in the spiritual world, he said, don't expect utopia, because every living entity is unique and individual, and therefore they're going to have differences of opinion. And if you have that in mind, you can be a little more tolerant also. And of course, I don't know the exact context you're talking about, but I'm just throwing out general ideas that can assuage that sense of anxiety when there is chastisement. A few thoughts. Is that okay? Thank you. Yes?
Thank you very much. Thank you. I had a couple reflections and one question. So, one reflection from the Madan Mohan temple in Karoli. There was one person who didn't even know how to read, but he saw the beautiful book cover on like the Krishna on it, and he just couldn't resist it. He just took the book.
He's worth it for the cover, right?
Yeah. And today as well, like there's so many devotees who were like, they were there and they just took the book without even thinking. Some were calling me like, you come here, please give me a book. And even when we were going, we were stuck in the traffic. We were trying to do some books there, and no one was taking it. But then someone across the street called me, you come here, and then he took the book. So it was very nice. And a question is like, because we were discussing this anger thing, there's something which affected me a little bit some time back. So I wanted to so it's like a devotee friend who is very close to me. Someone a little bit elder did not treat him well, someone who's a bit senior. So I couldn't like have that respect or like the feeling.
Big mic is the one that's
Okay, sorry.
projecting into the
Oh,
room.
yeah,
Small
sorry,
mic
sorry.
is going to the devotees online.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I just am not able to have that vision of that person now, because they have like done wrong to someone who is a bit more humble and doesn't say anything. How to deal with a situation like that? How to forgive?
You could go on the internet and start a petition to have the person banned from ISKCON, maybe. Just kidding. Yeah, those are hard things, because once you ring a bell, you can't unring it. And we'd like to have a sanguine outlook about all devotees. But if you live long enough, and I recommend it, to live as long as possible, you see a lot of stuff, and things change over time. People you had full respect from, it can go down to 96% because of an incident or something like that. Trust, faith, love, all those things are very subtle. They take a long time to build up, and they're easily diminished in certain circumstances. And the main ingredients that can build them back up again is time and mercy. Because there can be transgressions, and then at another time you can find that the person might redeem him or herself. In the meantime, it's best to reserve harsh judgment unless it becomes a chronic. Unless it's chronic in the person, and in which case it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, about finding some due process and escalating it. But just on a personal level, just don't be disappointed if you feel less enthusiastic about somebody than you did before, because we don't know everybody. We have a sense of what they're like and who they might be, but who knows anybody, ultimately. There's a lot of surprises when you're around people. They're probably surprised themselves at the ways they act. So you have to be somewhat reserved, and if you find out that there's somebody that wasn't who you thought they were, and that you don't think that you could fully respect them or associate with them the way you did previously, then just put them in another category, like from a distance, appreciate them, or find others to appreciate. Hare Krishna. Yes. 1, 2. Yes.
Hare Krishna, Burwash. I had a question. It doesn't have too much to do with the anger topic, but it's more on devotees and offense. So, what would your advice be to make sure we don't become too familiar with devotees, to create room for offense, but still feel comfortable around devotees?
Can you say what she said?
What would your advice be to make sure we don't become too familiar with devotees, to create room for offense, but still feel comfortable around devotees?
Oh, yeah, such an important question. And that is not just a question for the context of devotees, but everybody in any society has that to consider, our relationships with others and how to balance them properly. This is where etiquette comes into play. Etiquette is sort of a guardrail in society to keep us from crashing and burning, because, for instance, if somebody is senior to you, then you can show some deference. I'll give you an example. Pradyumna Prabhu, who's a very senior devotee, was sitting once in front of Prabhupada, but there was a more senior devotee. It was also in the room in front of Prabhupada's desk, and Pradyumna had sat down about a half a foot in front of this other devotee. And Pradyumna says, and he mentions this in his memories of Srila Prabhupada, that Prabhupada said to him, he is your Da, he's your senior, therefore you shouldn't sit in front of him. And he took from that Prabhupada was careful about etiquette, and if we're too careful, I don't want to phrase it like that. I would say, if we become overly formal with everybody, then it may be hard to develop relationships. But we should also not just discard it. It meaning the etiquette of dealing with certain kinds of people in certain ways. And within the context of the etiquette, then we have to see for ourselves, like in a relationship, there's give and take, and you find out over time what's too far and what's not, because you don't know until it's actually happening. Some friends I know, I can cut a joke at their expense, and we laugh like crazy because we're close enough so that we can cut each other down, and then that's part of having intimate friendship. And you find, as mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Kṛṣṇa and his friends, they jump on his back. And they say, you're not such a big man. I could take you any day of the week, right here, right now. And they wrestle him to the ground. And others who are devotees of Krishna are in awe and reverence and so forth, of course, that's their mood. But it's there in the spiritual world, it's there in greater society, and it's there in our society here. You just have to be a little conscious of, first, not transgressing etiquette, and then just judging by your relationship with people how to balance how you interact with them. And I think a lot of it is intuitive, that we can intuit how how people react when we get this close or we're that far away. Does that make sense? Did it answer your question? You can ask more. Use the mic.
Would you say that we should kind of test the waters a little bit then when it comes to relationships?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Let's just use cliches again. Test the waters. Yeah, find out, because you have to. Otherwise, we'll just sit in our room and well, I don't want to go out in case I go too far or offend anybody. You have to mix it up with people. And everybody knows we're all in the same boat socially, so, we're all testing the boundaries at every minute. Interesting subject, sociology, how do people interpret what other people are thinking or saying and how to interact. It's an ongoing thing. So yes, test it and see what happens.
Thank you.
Thanks. Great questions tonight. Yes, and this will be the last one, and then we're going to do our Damodar Ashtakam.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. It's a very interesting topic for all of us. I have a similar question like Shyam Priya about how distinguish from a positive and negative chastisement. So how distinguish these two? I agree with you. We need to distinguish, because if it's a negative come, be a negative. Okay. So if it's negative, can affect your. You can be discouraged. In the deaf community, it's a very small, and when something happens, we keep seeing the same people daily, because it's a small community. And that affects projects within the deaf community, because it affects the relationship. Because I've been discouraged for attitude of someone, so another deaf devotee. So I feel this problem could be like some kind of jealousy. I keep the association, but I'll be more careful, not as open as before with this devotee. So as I say, it's difficult to deal with this situation within a community which is very small. So my question is, how you sort it out these kind of situations within a very small group? Yeah, that's mainly the question.
Sure, thank you. Well, let's take the smallest group you can think of, maybe 2 people. For instance, say you live with another person. You have a roommate or you have a significant other, and you live together. And is it inevitable that there'll be some difference of opinion at some time between 2 people? I would say yes, unless they're AI robots, and they might be programmed different too, so they might have an argument. So how do 2 people deal with that? One way is that I find effective is to agree to talk about things when they come up. There are other ways that people deal with conflicts. For instance, you could make an ultimatum and say, unless you capitulate and accept my idea, then I'm not going to talk about it. Or you could just give the silent treatment and say, I'm not going to talk at all. I'm not even going to acknowledge that you're in the house. Has anybody in history ever done that? I'm not saying in this room, I'm saying in history anywhere in the world. Yeah, it happens. These are ineffectual ways of dealing with what could be a great opportunity to have a breakthrough. And so if between two people or a small community you have some common understanding about how to deal with different ways of looking at things or conflicts, and then you take the time to work on them, that's what builds a community. That's what builds a relationship. Relationships don't just fall together perfectly. They're built over time by those who are willing to do the hard work of working through differences of opinion, by talking and finding common ground. And in a small community, you have a great opportunity because inevitably there'll be conflict. But if you have a way that you talk about it straightforwardly, non-violently, and try to find a workaround. Once you find a workaround, we have a saying, which is, workarounds bring turnarounds. Also another saying which is either paradoxical or contradictory, whichever way you want to look at it, said, never make ultimatums. Because as soon as you make an ultimatum, then you can't do anything. You're just painted into a corner. So small communities, starting with two people, it's a great opportunity to practice what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. In the last part of the 12th chapter of the Gita, Krishna gives the qualities that he admires most in his devotees. And they all have to do with learning how to communicate with others. For instance, he says, don't become your enemy's enemy. And he also talks about how we should be tolerant of other people and the way they think and the way they act and so forth. So that's what spiritual community means. It doesn't just mean we all show up in the same room together and sing a song. But it means we have to work through the inevitable differences we have using Krishna's advice. And when we do that, that's a real test of spiritual strength. And when we do that also, devotees feel safe because they know if they make a mistake, if they offend somebody or somebody's offended by them, there's a recourse and a way to talk about it and work it out. Otherwise, you can just have isolated, well, I was going to say isolated relationship. That's also contradictory. So that's a similar answer to a lot of the other things, other questions we talked about. But it's really important though, isn't it? In personal relationships, that's what makes them productive and fun. I mean, why be in the Grihastha ashram unless you're making advancement? The way you make advancement in the Grihastha ashram is learn these lessons of how to get along with another human being over a long period of time without becoming disturbed by their personal habits, like you chew too loud, we can't live together anymore, or many other more extreme cases. But that's really important. That's as hard as being a sannyasi living under a tree. It's extreme renunciation, and it's a very high level of spiritual practice, is to learn how to get along with other people. So that's one of our prime objectives as Goshti Anandis. The Bhajan Anandis, they go live by themselves and just chant. But we live among others so that we can cooperate. And you know, Prabhupada said, you see in the context of his writings, he equates cooperation with bhakti. Because what is bhakti? It's cooperation with Krishna and with everybody else. It means with everybody else also. Learn how to cooperate with everybody. And that's what a community is. It's an opportunity to operate with other people. And that requires sublimating our egos for the greater cause. And the greatest cause is to serve Krishna together. Om Tat Sat. What a great day, huh? I'm really impressed with this, all the yatris here, because we've had a real spate of traffic jams. And I heard on the way back, I mean, we were going to jump out of the car when we got to Ramanmeti, but the gates were closed and almost everyone was gone. Everyone was in their cars trying to get home. But Divyanand Prabhu was telling us that, no, they still want to get out. They don't care when they get home. And it's all been worth it to go to all these places, despite the fact that it takes some time on the road. I remember today, especially the breeze coming off of the Jamuna. I just find that really pleasant. There's a few places where we go. There's one in Puri, where it's by the Dungamanga Nadi. It's a river where Lord Nityananda threw Lord Chaitanya's danda. He broke it in 3 pieces and threw it in the river. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu got back, said, "Where's my danda?" He said, "Yeah, I don't know. I think you're in ecstasy. You fell on it and it broke. And I don't even know where it is. I think somebody threw it in the river." And we have, there's a little platform there right above the river. It's a small river and it's very peaceful. And you can feel the breeze. These places, they leave an impression. And even if it's for a fraction of a second, that we have a appreciation for the Dham, that's our asset that we keep. Which also I felt when we went to Madan Mohan. Because I think I've been to Jaipur 5 times, and every time when we get there, someone says inevitably, "You want to go see Madan Mohan?" I say, "Yeah." You're like, "We're going to Karoli." Like, "Yeah, and by the way, how long does it take?" "An extra 6 hours." "I'll do it next time." Well, we did it. We went to Karoli and we saw. And the funniest thing was, Devavrata and Kanu Gopal had been there because they're intrepid. And they went everywhere before anybody got anywhere. They saw every deity before anybody even arrived. And they said, "It's the most peaceful place you could ever go." It's just a little town, and practically there's nobody there, and you just walk in and see the deity. And when we got there, it was a question whether we were actually going to make it up the street. And so we had a special ops driver who figured out how to get around the police barricades that wasn't letting 3-wheelers in. I don't know how you guys got there. It was hard for us to get up there though. But we felt so satisfied on the way out that we came and saw Madan Mohan. So it's such a fulfilling time we're having here. And it's really worth the time investment we're having together just to hear and chant. And just knowing that we like it is really important. When you know that, hey, this is really what I like to mainly do all the time, then you feel confident about going back and doing what other things you have to do, because you know your main interest in life is Krishna. That's really powerful. So, speaking of Krishna, this Kartik is a time to offer a simple act of devotion to Krishna. One year, many years ago, when I was here in Vrindavan, they asked me to give the first talk on the first day of Kartik. And they wanted me to say what Kartik was. And I thought, well, maybe I better find out for myself. So I read the book called the Kartik Mahatmya. And after going through many, many chapters, I came to a conclusion about Kartik. And that is the main thing Krishna wants from us on Kartik is just to offer a lamp. That's it. He's so undemanding if you offer with devotion. So that's what we're going to do now after a word from our sponsor.